Hello everyone. This presentation is about psychological theories of SLA. Learning about 3 psychological theories of SLA by Joshua Wandike. Number 1. Information processing. Approach based on IPR concerned with the mental process involved in language learning and use. IP is a psychological theory that explains how individuals acquire and process information in the mind. The IP theory suggests that learners acquire a second language by processing input and then store in the learner's memory. The input is retrieved when needed for output production. For example, when a learner is exposed to new vocabulary in a second language, the input is processed throughout various stages in the mind: attention, perception, and memory. Here in this example, we can see that here is the SLA learners, and there's attention, perception, and memory, and here is the input, and that can be through reading a book, newspaper, anything, and or listening to music, a book, the radio, TV, and all that information goes here, and when it's needed, the learner will put it out through ways like writing or speaking. So it's a storage here and then it goes out. Another example could be when a learner is practicing new grammar structure in a second language. The learner may first process the input by analyzing the structure and understanding of the meaning. For example, in a sentence like the sky is blue, and that will be the input, and then there's a process, then the storage, then it goes back to the process, and then to the communication, go back to process, and then when it's needed, it go out in the output. The input is then stored in the learner's memory and retrieved when needed for output production. The learner may then apply the grammar structure correctly in a sentence. Number 2. This is a psychological theory of SLA that suggests that language learning occurs through the formation of connection between neurons in the brain. Connectionists argue that learners gradually build up their knowledge of language through exposure to the thousands of instances of the linguistic features they eventually hear. According to this theory, language learning is a process of forming neural connections that allow learners to understand and produce language. For example, when learners of English hear a new word, the sound of the word activates a network of neurons in the brain. So let's think about one word that, let's say in Spanish, library is biblioteca, but library in Spanish, it will be librería. So that's a confusion there. And then what happens is when a person who's learning English and speaks Spanish and hear the word library, is connecting all these things, neurons, and they're looking for a connection. But once they hear that again and see the context in different ways, they understand that library is actually what it means in Spanish, biblioteca, which is a place where you go find books and other things. It's not a librería, which in Spanish would be a place where you go buy a book. So that's one word that I remember. It was confusing when I was learning English. This network of neurons is then connected to other networks of neurons that are related to the meaning of the word. Here is another example. Over time, as the learner is exposed to the word in different contexts, what I was saying before, the connections between the networks of neurons lead to more robust presentation of the word in the learner's brain. For example, go, let's go away, let it go all in, go up and never stop. Once you are exposed to all different contexts of the same word, all these connections are in the brain, and you start actually putting it together, and that's how this theory works. Number 3. This is a psychological theory of SLA that suggests that language development happens in a fixed order. With learners acquire languages structures that are progressively more complex. So in this theory, we can see that to learn is in a different way because it starts from the first level and it goes up. It goes up. Like it also has the aim of determining and explaining the sequence in which processing skills develop in relation to language learning. For example, the following acquisitional hierarchy of processing skills is proposed by Pigman and Hackinson, and we had that here. The theory proposed that the order of acquisition is determined by the ease with which learners can process and produce language structures. All that information is coming, and the learner process and produce language structure. Always be learning. For example, a learner of English may acquire basic word orders structures such as subject, verb, object, and subject auxiliary verb before moving on to more complex structures such as passive voice and complex sentences. Here is an example like the cat chased the mouse. So we see here the subject, the verb, and the object. But then in this theory, it's going to be moving to a more complex structures. Like for example, in this sentence, the cake was baked by Sarah, which is in passive voice. Another example could be the acquisition of grammatical morphemes, such as the in, ending in English. This theory suggests that learners acquire morphemes that are easier to process, such as present progressive in, before moving on to more complex morphemes such as past progressive in. And here is an example. I am currently typing on my keyboard. That will be a present progressive in right here. Typing. And then the other sentences, last night I was watching my favorite TV show when my friend called me. That's past progressive in. Watching. So this is the two different examples how this theory works. Questions. What are some potential limitations or criticisms of the processability theory of second language acquisition, and how might they impact our understanding of how learners acquire language? Number 2. How does the information processing theory of second language acquisition differ from other cognitive theories of language learners such as connectionist theory? And this is the end of my presentation. Please leave a comment. Thank you so much.